This is Suit Up Sports.
Suit Up Sports.
Where opinions are as sharp as a tailored suit. No fluff, no gimmicks, just unfiltered, hard-hitting takes on sports and a whole lot more. It's time to suit up. Now here's your host, DJ the Suit Stout.
Welcome to Suit Up Sports. I'm DJ the Suit Stout, along with 10-year NFL veteran Frank Garcia. Frank, how you doing?
I'm doing great, buddy. Thanks for just another day for us out here, and looking forward to another great show.
I feel like we haven't left, our studio or my house in days, because we have not only been getting ready for the Super Bowl, but we had great basketball games this weekend with Duke versus Clemson and UConn St. John's, Auburn against Florida.
Some big upsets over the weekend in basketball for sure.
Huge upsets, and we were cooking a pig for the Super Bowl party, so we had people over here all weekend. We didn't sleep, staying up with the pig and all that stuff. We had a great time, all to get ready for Super Bowl 59, Eagles versus Kansas City. We broke that game down. You and I have discussed it until the cows come home, and the Eagles are your Super Bowl champ. 40-22 over Kansas City. Never really was a close game. Philadelphia came out and seemed to be on their A game from the get-go. And Kansas City never really appeared to do anything until the game was kind of out of hand when they started putting some passes together. But the thing that really I thought was interesting about this game is when we broke this game down and we talked about this game, the Eagles and the Chiefs. On paper, we said that it looks like the Eagles have to be the team you choose to win on paper. They have the best offensive line, the best defensive line. I mean, we broke that down, but
matchups, right?
The matchups, and then but the hard part about taking Philadelphia was the fact that Kansas City has Mahomes, arguably the best player in the league, Andy Reid, arguably the best coach in the league, Spagnuolo, the best defensive coordinator in the league, or one of them. And so it was hard to really go with Philly. Kansas City with the experience, back-to-back Super Bowls, and it really kind of played out that way. On paper, really kind of told the story. The offensive line and the defensive line for Philadelphia just manhandled Kansas City. And even though Kansas City kept their streak of now 19 straight playoff games without allowing a 100-yard rusher, which a lot of people thought was going to be impossible the way Saquon had been getting it done, they kept that streak alive, but that didn't take into account Jalen Hurts and his 72 yards rushing, and just the way that their offense just seemed to seamlessly move down the field.
Well, let me say something about that. And I know a lot of people are going to look at the Eagles or the Chiefs or some of the other teams historically, but the one thing that really wasn't talked about enough is that just because the Eagles hadn't won that way doesn't mean that they can't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one thing for me that stood out, and why at the beginning of the playoffs, I felt like the Eagles were the best team on paper. And I thought it was either going to be the Ravens because of the momentum that they had, or the Chiefs because of, Mahomes. So,
yep.
But I don't think there was any contenders really on the other side. And ultimately, it came down to the Eagles, for me, just being able to adapt and adjust and win any type of game that they played. If you took away the run, which they did, they forced 8 guys up on the box. They blitzed the safeties on run blitzes consistently, but they were able to beat you throwing the ball.
Yeah.
Nobody gave Jalen Hurts any chance to be able to do that. And you want to make teams play to the weaknesses. And we all know that Saquon Barkley was having an MVP type of season, but really, I think the story should be, really honestly, the Jalen Hurts story, because nobody is even today talking about how good he has been in the 2 of the 3 Super Bowls that he's played in.
Yep.
And all the obstacles that he's overcome. Nobody gives this guy any credit for playing that position the way it's necessary for his team to win. It doesn't matter whether you win by 10 or 20 or 30. It matters just win, and figuring out a way to be able to do that in the most important, impactful plays and ways that you can. And I think Jalen Hurts really should be the story of this Super Bowl.
Yeah, and listen, I mean, what a redemption story. I mean, you go back to college with Jalen Hurts when he played at Alabama, and then got benched in the second half of the national championship game for Tua. Tua comes in, they win the game. He transfers to Oklahoma, where he does very well.
He does it. He has a great season.
Absolutely.
Heisman Trophy type of season at Oklahoma. And the story was, DJ, everybody was talking about at the next level, this guy can't play quarterback. He's going to be a great running back.
Or
right?
tight end.
He's going to be a great running back or an H-back, some sort of blocking guy. And, to his credit, he said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to go out there and prove that I can play this position and be impactful and effective as any quarterback in the league. And nobody ever gives this guy any credit because his yards aren't great. His stats aren't incredible. But what does he do? He wins. He just wins. The Eagles, because of the way they're built, have put themselves in a perfect storm of they have great receivers.
They do.
They have a really good coach. They have the best offensive line. They have the best defensive line. They have a great tight end. And Jalen Hurts has become a game manager. I'm not sure if you heard Tom Brady talk about it. He goes, that's the biggest compliment you can give to a quarterback.
Yep.
And everybody looks at that as a bad thing. No, it's a great thing if you do it with impact. And that's what Jalen Hurts has done his entire career in the NFL. And, again, this should be the Jalen Hurts story, but it's going to be more about, Pat Mahomes and his legacy and the three-peat and what he didn't do. No, it's what the other team did.
Yeah, and I think Jalen Hurts, is going to get the credit he deserves this time because you mentioned it earlier. He did get a lot of credit for how well he played in the previous Super Bowl against Kansas City. So I think that played a lot into.
But they lost.
Exactly. Now they come into this Super Bowl knowing that Kansas City is going to sell out to stop the run, which they had to. And Hurts comes in, and it shows that the coaching staff, Kellen Moore, who's going to be now the coach of the New Orleans Saints, it appears, had the confidence to know that if the run got slowed down, we know that Hurts can beat you with his arm. And, man, he threw some dimes yesterday. It wasn't like he was getting lucky. And he was making big play after big play. And the one thing I like about Hurts is, and this goes all the way back to when he was at Alabama, regardless of the situation, regardless of whether he's benched or starting, whatever, transferring, he's always been as professional as a kid that you can ask for. And even when you watch these interviews leading up to the Super Bowl, he never seems rattled. He never seems unfocused. Yesterday, before the moment
is never too big.
Hurts. And I heard I think it was Chris Long, Howie's son, and Chris Long played for the Eagles for quite some time and is still tight with that organization, and was on the team when they lost to Kansas City a few years ago in the Super Bowl. And he told the story that after the game, he went up to Jalen because Jalen had such a good game and they lost, and he went up to him just to give him some encouragement. And Hurts basically said to him, "Hey, look, don't worry about it. It's already been written. Like, we're coming back and we're winning. It's already been written. So get this off your plate." And Chris Long said that when Jalen walked away, he kind of sat there like, man, this kid's a young quarterback. We just lost a Super Bowl. And he's telling me, hey, don't worry about it. It's already written. We're going to win our Super Bowls. And the confidence that he has as a leader, because you remember last year, Philadelphia lost, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say they lost like their last 10 games, or they had an awful end of the season. They started off 10-0, I believe, and then they lost most of their last games.
Some injuries played into that.
And their defense was horrible last year.
Didn't play as well, right.
And they, and Howie Rose, their GM is the best in the league. He's
one of them.
One of them, at least. And, you would think other teams would start realizing the more SEC players you draft, the better. They
basically have a defense from University of Georgia.
So Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Ringo, and Nolan Smith in the last 4 years have won 2 national championships and now a Super Bowl.
He goes and gets winners.
Strong.
Yeah, he goes and gets winners, and he knows how to do it.
Yeah,
and he knows how to build a team, and it's with the foundation up.
Yeah,
and you would think that more teams would take that model, including, the team that we root here for locally, the Panthers. And, I think that was one of the big things that Dan Morgan was able to do this last year, was to establish at least a base with the offensive line. Now, he still has his work cut out for him, don't get me wrong, with the defensive line and things like that, because that's where really the game was a difference for, Mahomes on the offensive side and the Eagles on the defensive side. It was those front 4 guys. This is going to sound, crazy. We talk about the impact that coordinators have all the time. When I'm a coordinator and I can sit back and call a play, a coverage, and do this, because I know the 4 guys up front are dogs.
Mm-hmm.
They are quarterback hunters, and they're going to get after it and play bigger, faster, stronger than everybody else on the field. I'm going to look like a genius because I don't have to do squat.
Yeah.
I sit back, make a call, and let my guys go eat.
Well, let me ask you this, because the Eagles didn't blitz one time yesterday,
Not once.
which is unbelievable. Not one time did they blitz. And yet they were on Mahomes' butt every single play. So you, as a former offensive lineman in the NFL, a former center, you know, for those who don't know, played with the Panthers, played with the Rams, greatest show on turf, and Arizona Cardinals. But for you, as a guy that played center and guard, whether it be in college or pro in your career, when you are playing a game like that, and you're going up against a defensive line of 4 dudes that are just kicking y'all's butt around.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers come to mind very quickly.
Warren Sapp.
Warren Sapp, and when he was on his game, you know, I was playing with the Rams at the time, you know, DJ, and I can take you back to a game where he just took over, and it was in St. Louis, you know, and that's what, you know, kind of got me to believe that, you know, if you have a great defense and you have 4 guys up front, the New York Giants, another one.
Oh,
you know, look at what they did to Brady.
Yep.
You know, with Justin Tuck and Strahan, and you just go on and on down the list with the guys that they had. OC Yusum and Yor.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, they had 4 guys up front that they didn't have to blitz.
Yep.
They just sat back and let those guys up front eat. And that's the formula for going out there and beating really talented quarterbacks. They have the ability to run. And
they kept him in the pocket all night long.
What they did, well, they made him move off his spot.
Yep.
And they had the speed within that defense to be able to run him down.
Right.
That's what other teams haven't been able to do.
Yeah, Jalen Carter at one point in time, we were watching the game together, and Mahomes was running around like he normally does. Usually he either runs for a first down or makes a completion downfield. And Jalen Carter was fast enough to track him down and tackle him from behind, which is, you know, you don't see that often.
You don't see that often,
yeah.
Right? And that's the difference. So as when I'm an offensive player and I'm looking at a defense, especially if I'm calling plays, I coach high school football, you call plays, you look at, you know, the impact that, you know, defensive have. If they're going to blitz, this is your answer. It creates matchups.
Yeah.
Right. And that's all a blitz does. It's not an automatic sack because you decide to blitz as a D coordinator. What it does is it creates a matchup for you.
Yep.
It puts a big guy on a little guy, a fast guy on a slow guy, and it makes the quarterback think faster than what they're ready for. It gets them out of timing and rhythm. Mahomes is so cerebral, just like some of these other great quarterbacks that had played before him, Brady, Breeze, you know, Bledsoe, all the guys that, you know, you talk about, you know, Manning.
Yeah.
You know, if you blitz those guys, they eat it up. Kurt Warner, they eat it up because cerebrally they're able to process faster than anybody else. But if you sit back and play coverage, there's nothing for them to react to. They have to wait for the play to develop. But if the guys up front are creating so much havoc, there's no time for that play to develop. So I have to get off my spot. I have to move around. I have to move within the pocket, and I have to make things happen and or throw the ball into tight windows.
Yeah. That's
what the Eagles were able to do with Mahomes, is they forced Mahomes to make reads that he's maybe expecting a blitz, or there's a guy directly in his face where he's feeling uncomfortable, and it impacted him 2 or 3 times. The 2 interceptions were when he was getting hit. 6 sacks within the entirety of the game. But in that first half, they shut that passing game down.
They did.
And on top of that, you take into consideration what the Eagles were to do offensively, ball control. It was a perfect storm for how you beat a talented offense. You keep them on the field. You keep them on the sideline.
Yeah.
If they're on the sideline, they don't have the ability to impact. There's no momentum. There's no spark. You can't get some rhythm in what you're trying to do. And the Eagles played that to perfection. They ran the ball 2, 3, 4, 5 yards. And then Jalen Hurts either, you know, was able to, you know, beat pressure with his feet or his legs. I think he was the leading rusher of the night.
Yeah, 72 yards.
So, I mean, that's another impact that he was able to have on this game that nobody's going to give him credit for. It's very similar to what Cam Newton was able to do. I know he had the bigger numbers and he was able to throw it with his big cannon arm, but if you have a quarterback that has the ability to run and keep plays alive, first downs and touchdowns, you have a weapon back there.
Yeah.
And defenses don't know how to adjust that. But from what Patrick Mahomes was saying is that there's no space to throw the ball. The Eagles did a great job covering up with those zones. And when Patrick Mahomes was wanting to run, because they're not blitzing or playing in man coverage, they can see when he's coming and still figure out and find where he's reading.
As opposed to being in man coverage where your back's to the quarterback.
If I'm in man coverage and you running past me, I have to go with you.
Right.
I have to turn my back and run to the quarterback.
Yep.
If I'm playing zone, I bump you, I pass you off to the next level, and I see what's happening in front of me with that quarterback coming. So that was what the Eagles were able to, they were to keep everything in front of him. And the biggest thing is they kept him on the sideline where he didn't have the ability to have the impact. Now, like 30-something yards in the first half.
35 yards in the first half.
I mean, arguably probably one of the most dominant performances from a defense that we've ever seen, in a Super Bowl game with a explosive offense with arguably what they're calling the next Tom Brady, maybe better. I mean, those are arguments that I'm sure we'll talk about today.
Which we're
going to talk about today. But I mean, they put him on the sideline and didn't give him a chance to impact that game whatsoever.
And they looked off from the first drive of the game. And the one thing that you got to give Philadelphia credit for as well is that it isn't like they did this against a team that had holes. Like it didn't like the Chiefs come into this game with holes.
Chiefs had lost one game,
and they have again arguably the best coach in the NFL, an offensive genius, and he couldn't figure out this defense. It isn't like Andy Reid's not seen that defense before, that coverage. He's seen it a million times.
They didn't give Andy Reid the ability to do that. You know why? It's the Brenton Buckner, longtime NFL player, played for the Steelers, played for the Panthers, played for the Niners. I mean, still coaching still coaching in the NFL today.
Yep, great guy.
He said something that stands. It's not about the X's and the O's. It's about the Jimmies and the Joes.
Yep.
And that stands the test of time. You can have the best play caller out there that you want, and he has the ability to scheme up things, but if you don't have time to run your offense or your defense, is getting to them before it's the guys up front. It's the Jimmies and the Joes that make plays.
Yep.
So, as good as Bill Belichick is, as good as Andy Reid is, it's still about the players. It's still about the X's and the O's.
Oh yeah.
Or it's still about the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's.
Just look at what happened when, everyone knows Bill Belichick is maybe the best coach ever, but look what happened when Brady left that team. They haven't been good since. And it's not that Belichick forgot how to coach. They just lost players. And so
they lost the player.
And, so in this game,
Tom Brady went on to do what?
He won with Tampa Bay.
He won another Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. So in this game, that's what I'm saying, that shows you just how dominant Philadelphia was the fact that Kansas City has that. This is the best defense Kansas City's had in the Super Bowls they've been in. Their offense, obviously, they've added Worthy, who had 7 or 8 catches for 150 yards.
Yeah, but he didn't have a bulk. He didn't have a bulk of his yards until the Eagles were in prevent defense. Playing a little bit soft.
But my point is not that. My point is just the fact that the offense that won the Super Bowl last year, they've added a Xavier Worthy. They added a Hollywood Brown. It wasn't this team wasn't coming limping in. Is my point. Philadelphia took the champs. And you got to beat the champs. People were talking about the referees this, referees that, and we've always said, just like in boxing, you got to beat the champ. You got to knock them out. And Philadelphia came in here with the mindset of, we're not going to let the referees, take this from us. We're going to whoop their butt so bad that they can't do it. And if you look at the officiating, I think there were some bad calls on both sides. But
the very first call of the game, we're thinking, or the very first series, when Brown goes down the sideline and has the controversial push off.
Yeah.
We're thinking to ourselves, or at least I am, okay, here we go again. The referees didn't get the memo to just kind of swallow your whistle, because that was a very questionable call.
I agree. I mean, they could have called it or could not have called it. I would have been fine either way. I would have leaned to not calling it because he never grabbed the face mask.
He never touched him.
Yeah, I mean, he put his hand on the face mask. But you're right. When that happened, everyone starts going, oh, here we go.
It's going to be a one-sided. Yeah, here we go.
But honestly, I mean, if you look at the end of the game, Kansas City probably had, if one team was going to complain about the officiating, Kansas City probably had, but no one's going to hear that. It definitely had nothing to do with the outcome of the game. And a lot of people who hate the Eagles, I'm one of those guys. I don't like either of those teams, but I'm not an Eagle fan. But even as a guy who had no dog in that fight and was pretty much just following where my bets were, when there was a bunch of those out there and where my squares were and all those, Philadelphia, even I was like, man, I hope there's no bad calls in this. I want to get rid of that whole narrative. I don't want to hear it anymore. Please don't let Kansas City get this game because of some crazy calls. And so after that first call, we're going, all right, that could definitely not have been a call. But then it kind of evened out. Like I said, Kansas City, even Denard Hopkins after the game, the receiver for Kansas City, who's been around forever, been a great player forever, even he in the locker room afterwards started complaining about the officiating, and I'm sure everyone in the world that's not a Kansas City fan is going, "Oh, well, about time.
I can tell you as a player, they read the papers just like everybody else does. They look at social media just like everybody else does.
Yeah.
Even Travis Kelce in the pregame, the press conference, where it's the players go out and meet all the press, media day, where they go out there and they're sitting. He even mentioned that.
He asked the media, "Why are you making this such a story? Like, why are you
buying into it?"
Yeah.
No, he knew it was a story.
Yeah.
He goes, "But you of all people, why are you buying it? Why are you buying into this?
Yeah.
This narrative?
Like, why do you keep getting it out there where people are gonna?"
And I want to remind you, or even point out to you, I don't know if you saw this or not, but I noticed this during the game. After that series, when they had the controversial call, no call, Saquon Barkley was coming to the sideline.
Yep.
And I know if you remember, if you could read his lips, but I know exactly what he was saying.
Somebody chill out.
Chill out.
Yeah.
That's not going to be the difference between winning and losing this game.
Yeah.
Be calm. We've been here before. Don't let your emotions get the best of you, because that's going to speed you up and spiral you out of control where you play differently than what you normally do. That's just a call that went against us.
Right.
Those are going to happen for us. Those are going to happen. That's part of the game.
And he was animated. Like, he literally, I saw exactly what you're talking about. I mean, he ran over to the guys that were fired up about the call, and he was very animated, telling them to get back, be quiet, chill out. This has nothing to do, because he didn't want them to start going, here we go. We go. Because once you let that creep in, and again, from being an NFL player for years and years, and I played sports, through my career in college, when you let that creep in your head, there's nothing good that comes out of it, especially that early. And I think you're right. Saquon pulled the team over, and once they listen to him, by the way, like, he's the leader on that team.
And that's one thing. He's one of them. I mean, Jalen Hurts is the leader of that team for sure.
Yeah, I would.
But Saquon has a big say, and I think for me, when you're going into this game, even before the game started, 2 years ago when the Eagles had a 10-point lead going into halftime against the Chiefs, as good as Mahomes was in that game, and the controversial calls and all the other things, the one thing the Eagles did differently in that game versus where they were today was go get Saquon Barkley.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the most impactful move. So the general manager for the Philadelphia Eagles needs to be given all the credit in the world, because he knew his team. He knew exactly what his team needed, and he went out and found that guy for his team, because Saquon may have not had the impact in that game running the ball, but he did, because what did he do? He forced everybody to be in that box, so it opened and allowed other players to do. The difference between a good player, a great player, and a Hall of Famer is good players are going to go make plays. Great players, are going to be really good at what they do. Hall of Famers are going to make you, that guy next to him, and the guy next to him all better.
Mm-hmm.
Saquon Barkley makes everybody on that team better because of the impact he has for that team, because defenses are going to crowd the box, and it's going to allow his stars to go out there and make plays. He makes other guys around him better just being on the field.
Yeah, and he had some great blocks yesterday. He still had 97 total yards. I mean, he had 6 catches for 40 yards. He had
But it's not just that. It's the impact.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So normally we've been seeing him put up 200 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns, and we see that. This game you didn't see that, but it was the other things that he did. And look, he had 6 catches. I think that's the most catches he's had in a game in quite some time. So you're right. He found other ways to help win, knowing that he wasn't going to get his 150 yards this game. And that takes an unselfish player, by the way, and which he's shown his whole career, much less this year, when he has taken himself out in games or sat out the last game when he could have had a record. He still got the record yesterday because he needed 30 yards to be the all-time leading rusher. So he got that. But you're right, man. I mean, as a guy who roots for the Giants and hated losing Saquon, it was great to see him get this championship. And, listen, like you said, you can give the best coach bad talent and they're going to struggle. You can give a great running back a bad offensive line and he's going to struggle. And that's where he has been for most of his career with the Giants. Now he comes over to the Philadelphia Eagles who has the best offensive line, probably one of the best offensive lines ever, by the way. I mean, you look at that.
Well, they were by far the biggest to ever play. They averaged 6'6", 339 pounds. And I'll bring you back.
When you play, what was the average?
Oh gosh, I mean, I'm 6'2", 300 when I played.
But even then
I was weight wise, I was about average for a center, but height wise, I was on the smaller side. right? I was a shorter center. I would say the average of the offensive lines back there are probably 6'4", 315, 310, 315. I mean, the size and the speed of the games, and it's the way these guys are built. Look at the offensive line for the Eagles. Not one of those guys was fat. They didn't have bad bodies.
They can move.
They were all athletic freaks that went out there. If you were to see what that, they don't look like they're 340 pounds.
Let's talk about this. I mean, a few weeks ago, we were discussing the whole tush push thing and how a lot of people can't hate it. And I can't stand it either. However, if they can't stop it, you can't take it away from a team who's good at it. And you were saying that the reason that they're so good at it and other teams can't do it is because the offensive line that they have pushing the pile and then the other guys behind them. But that offensive line is just different.
It's an unstoppable play because of the guys up front.
Yeah.
And they don't get in. I mean, they get credit for it. You know, people are going to call it unfair, but hell, people called Shaq unfair because he was bigger. He changed the way they played the game too.
Yep.
Right. They went from playing man to man to allowing teams to play zone defense so that they could slow down Shaq. I mean, he changed the rules in the NBA. This offensive line, I don't know if they're going to change the rules for the NFL because go get one. Right. Go get those guys.
They found one of their left tackle. A rugby player in Australia. I mean, and he's 6'8". He runs like a deer.
Yep.
And
he's 360 pounds.
Yeah. I mean, those guys are hard to find. You can find a 6'8" guy that weighs that much, but one that can run and think and be athletic enough
to bend.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just. I mean, I played with 6'8" guys, and a lot of times they're a little awkward. They're lanky. They're tall. They're clumsy. They have big steps. I mean, this guy's 6'8", 360 that plays like he's 6'2", 300. Right? He's quick. He's athletic. He's explosive. He plays with great pad level.
Yep.
And you add four other guys. I mean, Lane Johnson is another guy.
Yep.
I mean, you see that guy, and I'm not, going to be looking at guys' physiques and telling you, hey, that guy's good looking. But, I mean, there's when you see a guy, you're like, damn. I mean, what is he doing differently? They don't look the same.
No.
They don't grow those people. You don't see those people walking on the streets.
Yeah, the offensive linemen.
You see those people in museums.
Yeah. The offensive linemen, when you played and when we grew up watching football, were all these big dudes, normally with big guts and just strong, tough dudes. And you're right, now these guys look like they could play defensive end move like
they're tight ends or they're power forwards in the NBA that have eaten way too many cheeseburgers. That's what they are. Yeah. They're athletic freaks that go out there and have the ability, and they've spent their life in the weight room. They've spent their life, eating creatine and pumping up and putting weight on. So, when they're out there, they have, that size, that mass. And, we could look back to the Bills a couple of weeks ago, right? Allen is a genetic freak as well.
Yeah.
Right. You knew that they were going to run that sneak. You kept saying they're going to run it to the left.
Off the left guard.
They're going to run it to the left guard. Okay. Everybody in the world knows that the Eagles are going to run that play. They're going to run it right over the center.
Yep.
Now you have to stop it.
Yeah.
And it was the same defense that did the same exact thing against the Buffalo Bills, who are pretty good at it, by the way. They had been pretty successful at that. They stuffed Josh Allen, whether the controversial call, whether he did, that wouldn't have been a question mark. When they got to the goal line against the Chiefs, and I told you right then, watch the difference between the push up front and then what the Buffalo Bills weren't able to do. Those offensive line, the surge and the impetus that they had, the momentum that they carried, all Jalen Hurts had to do was jump on the back and just ride the wave.
Well, and the tush push that they ran in the game yesterday in the Super Bowl, it wasn't like their normal one was going for a yard. I mean, I think it was at least 2.5 yards out. We were even wondering if they were going to do it.
I mean,
and they got in with ease. They pushed him 3 yards before he even knew he was getting touched.
But you look where the center ended up. He's 4 yards deep, 5 yards deep in the end zone. Right, they're knocking those guys back. They've created that wedge, and those defensive tackles were pretty good. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw what Chris Johnson was doing for the Chiefs. Is it
Chris Jones?
Chris Jones.
Yeah,
Chris Jones was doing with the Chiefs after that play. He was over on the sideline. You know what he was doing? He was checking himself.
Yeah,
his neck. You know why? Because he tried to do the same thing against the Bills, but this time he ran into a brick wall. He had the ability to penetrate and create some separation where he could get skinny and knife that gap, where this time there was no gap.
Nothing.
And it was a steel wall being moved, and he ran his head into it, and it created him to have a little bit of Stinger, and they were working on the sideline, and that was that. I'm just telling you, that's the difference. The biggest difference, between a championship team and a team that's almost good enough.
It would be interesting to see Philadelphia's defensive line going up against that offensive line in practice every day. I mean, that had to just be a battle because Philadelphia, they've got their two best lines, big dudes that can move. Like the battles they must have had in practice every day.
But that's where you sharpen steel.
No question.
All right, you sharpen steel in practice, and you're 100% right. I remember when I was with the Rams, and there's guys in practice that you look for that you're like, okay, this is going to be a playoff.
Right.
He's a backup guy. He's a young player, whatever it might be. When there's nobody to look, when you look over there and there's nobody you're going to take a playoff, you have a pretty good team.
Right.
Because your depth is going to be solid. Right. And you know what that's going to force you to do?
Bust your butt.
It's going to force you to get better because nobody wants to get embarrassed in practice. So if I'm sharpening my sword against iron, and I'm going against sharpen, I have no choice. I mean, that's where you're 100% right. In practice, they have more. Their backups probably would start for a lot of teams, and the guys that they're playing against, their battles. Right. But that's it's going to do. It's going to make you better.
Yeah, and it did. I mean, listen, on paper, we said going in, even the secondary for Philadelphia, which have two rookies starting, which is unheard of for the most part at cornerback and playing man, a lot of man. And Dijon had the big pick six yesterday. But we did talk about maybe the lack of experience in their secondary with the two rookies, Mahomes against them. But again, because the pressure that defensive line got on them, they didn't even have to guard these guys that long. I mean, it was.
Well, I mean, there's some coverage sacks that the defensive helped out. The backs helped out a bunch because, you're dropping into coverage. You're creating that quick passing game that Mahomes likes to run, and it's not there, right? So that's where you give a little bit of credit to, the coordinator and, what he was able to do is that, disguising coverages is going to be one thing, but there wasn't a lot of man. It was all zone.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have four guys up front, they can just flat out get after it. And what they also did, DJ, is that, a lot of times, as a defensive line, when you don't have the guys up front, you have to create some sort of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
You do that with a lot of stunts, ETs, which means the end and the tackle stunt, or a TE, which means the tackle in the end. These guys were just rushing and then playing off of each other, right? They didn't have a specific stunt that was necessarily called,
right?
But they could read, the quarterback and the depth of when they got that penetration. They knew Mahomes was going to step up. And they naturally fell into a TE stunt where those ends were coming inside and crashing, and there was nowhere for Mahomes to run. Normally, Mahomes sees that, and he steps up, and he gets skinny, and he's elusive, and he finds his way through there somehow. Not with these guys. They're fast, they're explosive, and they were dominating guys up front, and there was nowhere for Mahomes to escape to.
Were you surprised that and Kansas City's the one hole I guess Kansas City has had this year has been the running back position. Pacheco broke his leg, just came back a few weeks ago. Hasn't looked the same. Kareem Hunt, they picked up towards the end of the year, who has looked good, but it seemed like he didn't even play yesterday. Like I think I remember him getting the ball once or twice. And, the one thing I kept thinking in my head was if they can run the ball, and I know that's easier said than done, but I felt as if Kansas City should have tried to run the ball more earlier. Now, I know they got behind quick. That changes things a little bit. They also probably knew that the way that their running backs and offensive line matched up against Philadelphia's defense, it was going to be tough sledding. But I was kind of surprised they didn't try to run the ball a little more consistently early in the game.
I'll take you back to, I think it was last time, I believe it was Brady was playing the Chiefs when Tom won that Super Bowl, or when they beat them, and this is back when they had the cheetah, they had Tyreek Hill, and I kept saying to myself, with Andy Reid, they keep trying to throw the ball down the field, and Tyreek's trying to run go routes, and they've just eliminated him from. Why are they not running the ball more?
Mm-hmm.
What the team, I think it was the Patriots that were playing him at the time, might have been the Bucs. I'm not sure. I can't remember the exact game, but I know the scheme that the defense was playing was a Tampa cover 2.
Right.
Every player knows that if a team is going to play you in a cover 2 with 7 guys in the box, there's only one way to beat that because you're going to be throwing in tight windows. The best way is run the ball.
Yep.
But you have to be consistent. I think most people that have the ability to do that, are going to understand that Andy Reid wants to throw the ball.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to throw the ball down the field. Is he going to have the patience to run the ball? They should have put Tyreek in the backfield. They should have motioned him. They should have put him in multiple positions, and they didn't. They bracketed him and, manned up on Kelsey because they had a really good player to do that. And they said, these other guys are going to have to beat us, and they couldn't because they knew that Andy Reid wasn't going to be consistent enough running the ball. The same thing applied here in this game.
Yeah, they could use Worthy in a lot of those Tyreek things you're talking about. They've used them all year running the ball.
Put him in the backfield,
sweeps.
run him out of the, run isolation routes like they do with McCaffrey.
Yeah. It's
called a little Texas route. You run a little dart, and you run to the open space. If the guy's outside leverage, you come inside. If he's inside leverage, you break it out. But it's a one-on-one route. But what it does is it creates mismatches, right? And that's where Andy Reid in years past has not been, he
wants to throw the ball.
He wants to throw the ball down the field, and he wants to, just take his chances with Mahomes, which rightfully you understand because the guy just makes things happen and makes great throws. But, when you got the guys up front pushing around, you got to be able to run the ball to get them out of cover too, because if they're playing that zone defense, those windows are going to be tight. Coverage is going to be there, and those guys eventually are going to get home. And if they can run and catch you, they're gonna isolate and maybe eliminate a guy like Mahomes.
Yeah, I was surprised that they didn't try to run the ball a little more consistent. But also, like I said, if you're Kansas City, you also know that Pacheco wasn't right. Since he's come back from the broken leg. Hunt, I was surprised.
Did he even play?
I mean, I think I remember him getting the ball one time. Maybe it was even a pass he didn't catch, but like he had been solid, and so
it's easy to say, but when you get down 14-0, you get down, you have a little bit of a moment, starting to panic, and you start looking to say, am I able to do this? Am I going to have the patience to run the ball down the field and take what the defense gives me? And I think that's where, when you look at what the Eagles were able to do, they knew that they were going to play the percentages and got the lead, and that the Chiefs weren't going to have the patience to do that.
Yeah. How did you, in the second half, you coming out, it's 24-0. Kansas City has not been in a position like this. Now, Kansas City, ironically, had been down 10-0 in every one of these Super Bowls they've been in. So when they were down 10-0, everyone, I think, on the Kansas City sideline was like, yeah, we've been here. And even as a viewer watching it, you're going, they need a touchdown or even a field goal. And
we kept waiting for it.
Kept waiting. And then towards the end of the first half, and you're going, somebody said they only have 35 yards of offense. We're like, what? And then it's halftime. And then we said, well, maybe if Kansas City could score before halftime, they get the ball first. Well, they didn't. Philadelphia scored before halftime. And so now you come out in that second half and you're in the locker room, and it's a lot longer of a halftime than it usually is due to the halftime show that they do for the Super Bowl. These guys had to feel demoralized, getting their butts whooped. Now they have to sit in this locker room for a lot longer than they normally would have to come out, knowing that the chances that they're going to come back are slim and none. Tom Brady, unless Tom Brady's in the game and, and does it like he did to the Falcons. But they come out of that locker room, and Philadelphia really never even gave them a chance to breathe. Like, even when you thought, okay, Philadelphia would score, or get a turnover, or, it was about as dominant. First of all, it's the biggest butt whooping that I can remember in a Super Bowl.
I mean, the game was 40-22, but the game really wasn't that close.
It wasn't. Yeah.
It really wasn't that close.
It wasn't. There was never a point in time in that game after the first quarter, probably, where you went, all right, this is gonna be a good game coming down. We hoped, but I mean, it never happened. And so when you're Kansas City coming out of that locker room at halftime, and I know you're athletes, I know you're paid to play, and I know we all have heart, and we're gonna fight, all we can throughout a game. But gosh, that's got to be tough coming out.
I mean, there is no recipe for getting your ass whooped, and you go in halftime, you make all the adjustments you want, and you're going to say, this is what they're doing. How can we better attack that? This is the zone they're playing. Let's run some routes to be able to affect that. But when those guys up front are just pushing the pocket and impacting the game the way that they impacted the game, they really should be the MVP of this game.
Right.
I mean, if you're going to give a game ball or an MVP, it's going to be to every one of those guys up front on the defensive line for the Philadelphia Eagles, because they were probably the most dominant guys I've seen up front since the New York Giants when they had that run and they were able to beat the GOAT in Tom Brady
twice.
Because I'm going to tell you, everybody's going to sit there and say, well, you're crazy, Frank. That 2008 New England team with Randy Moss was the most dominant team I've ever seen in the NFL. And I've seen sports and watched the sport since I was a kid.
Yep.
I'm 53 years old now. I'm an old man. I'm an old dog. And I played a lot of years in this league, and I've seen some great offenses. I played on one of them. I played on a damn good offense. There wasn't a team that was more dominant than that 2008 New England Patriots team. I remember doing sports talk radio, and I remember the talk, people calling in and saying Belichick should be ashamed of himself. There should be a mercy rule. I mean, are we talking the NFL? Or are we talking high school sports here? They were whooping teams like the varsity whoops the JV, and everybody's throwing the flags out and saying, this isn't the YMCA, guys. Everybody's not going to. Those guys are getting paid a lot of money to stop that guy.
Yep.
And if you're not going to stop him, he's going to keep scoring.
It's gonna be a long day.
And what the Giants were able to do to that team in that Super Bowl was exactly to verbatim, took the script right out of the playbook and gave it to the Philadelphia Eagles, because that's exactly what they did to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, they did. I mean, it was as dominant as the Ravens against the Giants.
Those are two. Those were two great teams, but they weren't
the Ravens had just one of the best defenses ever. And then that Giants team had Kerry Collins at quarterback. Their offense was average at best.
But they weren't playing like I just said. I mean, you look at one of the most explosive offenses in the entire NFL history. Randy Moss and Tom. Look at the numbers back then.
Yeah,
that was 2008 before they were throwing the ball around like they are now. And I mean, he was 40 points, 35, 38, 42 points, 50 points. I mean, they scored 50 something points, and they kept scoring at the very end. They were destroying people, and Randy Moss had an incredible year. They were 17-0 going into into that game.
The last game of the year, Giants beat them. They almost beat them. Excuse me. Right?
Yeah, well, no, they lost. They beat the Giants. They were undefeated going into the Super Bowl, and if they had won that game, it would have been the greatest team in the history of the NFL. They lost the wrong game.
Yeah.
Because if they would have lost a game earlier, they'd have been the Super Bowl champs, and it would have still been the greatest team in NFL history.
Yeah, that season, the Giants almost beat them at the end of the season, but they lost at the end of the game, and then they got the rematch in the Super Bowl, and that's when they got them. But yeah, that team was dominant. And this Philadelphia team isn't going anywhere. I mean, they've got some big free agents they need to re-sign, but they've got youth all over that team. They've got draft choices all over that team. Their general manager has already shown that he's not afraid to trade up, down, whatever. They signed free agents like Saquon. I mean, so they're not going anywhere.
I mean, think about that. I mean, we're talking about dynasties and what the Kansas City Chiefs did. How does this team get better? How does that Philadelphia Eagles team get better? What do they do?
Yeah, I mean, that. And
what
again,
position where were they weak at?
That's the thing. Their offensive line is going to remain. And listen, that offensive line that was so good, you got to remember, they replaced Jason Kelce, who's going to be a Hall of Fame center, one of the best ever. So this offensive line that was so dominant did that, replacing a Hall of Fame center. Like, that's remarkable. Yep. And so they're not going anywhere. And when you look at the NFC as a whole, that division's just going to be nuts now, because you got Jaden Daniels with the Skins. The Giants are going to bring in a quarterback. Who knows who that'll be? The Cowboys, who knows what that'll be? But you got the Eagles and the Redskins aren't going anywhere. Kansas City, again, they have some free agents that they'll lose this offseason, but they're always their general manager has done a great job of restocking. So these two teams aren't going anywhere. I mean, they're going to be, there's a reason why they've met 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls. Now they're even, and it wouldn't surprise anybody if you see these guys again in the next year or the years to come.
The Philadelphia Eagles in the last 2 games scored 95 points.
Yeah.
In the NFC divisional game, the championship, against the team that you just talked about, the Washington Redskins,
Commanders, whatever you want.
Whatever you. I call them Redskins. With a quarterback that was as hot as anybody, they dismantled them.
Yep.
And they did the same thing to the Kansas City Chiefs. 95 points in 2 games. I mean, I don't know if you get any more dominant playoff run, maybe in the history of the NFL, than what we just saw with the Philadelphia Eagles.
I mean, they didn't get stopped often, and against the Skins, it was more Saquon running at will and opening things up. And then on this game, it was Jalen Hurts. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to finish up on the Super Bowl, talk a little college basketball, maybe a few other things. But we'll be right back after this on Suit Up Sports.
It's time to suit up. Here's your host, DJ the Suit Stout.
Welcome back to Suit Up Sports. I'm DJ the Suit Stout along with Frank Garcia. And we want to welcome a new audience today. WHKY 14.2 over the air. 5 different cable networks ranging from App State all the way to Montgomery, Alabama, Southern Atlanta,
Blowing up.
Charlotte, and a lot of that in between. So if you are watching us, tonight's our first night. And thank you for joining us. Frank and I have worked together for 20 plus years when I ran radio stations and Frank played in the NFL, and have done sports radio and things like this over the years. And we're excited to be on with you guys. Any comments or questions, you can email me at dj@suitupsports.com or frank@suitupsports.com. You'll also see that on the screen. And we just wanted to welcome everybody to the show. We're going to talk sports across the board. So we're going to focus more on the Southern stuff, you know, the SEC, the ACC, the NFC South, things like that we care about in this area that I just mentioned. But we're also going to cover the things that happen across the country and anything that we think makes a good story that we can debate about or laugh about. We're also going to talk cooking and a lot of things like that guys do that kind of accompany sports.
Like hanging out at a bar.
Kind of like hanging out.
We're gonna be your 2 neighborhood drunks.
Well, maybe. I mean,
the funny thing is though, DJ, is that they used to say that we had a face for radio,
right?
Because that's what we did, right?
True.
But we're like fine wine, and we're now graduated to television, and we get better with age,
no doubt. And I'm hoping our producer over here, Big D, can figure out a way maybe to take some of the gray out of my beard and make it a little darker. Like not like Ryan Day dark where I look like I painted it with a Sharpie. Like I don't want it that dark, but maybe he can give me like a little color on the beard.
I'm more worried about the 10 pounds that the TV adds to you.
Yeah,
so,
good Lord.
Goodness gracious. I'm already feeling like
the
holiday weight is on.
After we cooked yesterday. So as I mentioned, and I know a lot of you watching and listening on the podcast did your own Super Bowl parties and your own menus and that. And so we tend to try to do it big. So we went and bought an entire pig and smoked it. We started early Sunday morning.
I can't believe the preparation that you guys put into that. I mean,
it was a lot.
I don't think people even that were here appreciate the amount of time that you put into that.
Yeah, it was a lot. And one of my good buddies, Matt Wilson, who is a great cook and loves it, loves great on a grill and smoking things. And we actually have a cooking show that's coming out soon that we'll share with you guys. But
you're not going to want to miss that either.
Yeah, we know what we're doing on the grill and in the kitchen. And Matt came over. We went and got the pig. And we'll also have video of all this stuff that we'll share over the next few weeks. But man, we got up, we put that thing on about one in the morning, I believe, and we stayed up with it and make sure the wood chips were in there and that everything was going the way we wanted it to go. And then in the morning we're making the baked beans, the mac and cheese, and the cold. People brought coleslaw,
making me hungry.
Salad, and we had a great spread. And then my wife Krista makes the best old fashions if you're into bourbon. And so she was making smoked old fashions for everybody. I don't think she had a minute to even come up and watch the game because she was getting so many requests on the.
She was doing her job.
Yeah, she's an old fashioned maker.
I hope she didn't hear me say that.
No, she'll come marking.
Yeah, I know,
marching
right?
in here and knock you out. But no, it was a great time. So yeah, if you're getting hungry right now, it's probably because all the food that we ate last night.
The Buffalo Trace old fashions.
They were great.
They were phenomenal. And I got to commend the chefs. I give you the chef's kiss.
Well, the hard part about doing the pig, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it because you're cooking the entire pig, right? And the way we do the pig picking is, we cook all the meat. And then, if something's done a little early, you can take it off. But, you put it back in the pig and you mix it all together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the pig picking idea. And so, we did that. And Matt kind of is the one that got his hands dirty, and our buddy Conrad, they did that. I'm coming off 2 back surgeries. So, I wasn't much of a help when it came to that.
You're a good organizer.
Yeah, I did the mac and cheese and the baked beans, and I kind of sat out there and made sure the music was right and all that stuff. But I couldn't get too dirty with bending over. Man, they did a great job. So we'll have some pictures and some videos of that. And I'm sure we'll be eating leftover barbecue tonight. And then I'll probably take the leftover barbecue and make Brunswick stew the night after that. So it's a lot of, I think it was an 80-pound pig that we smoked.
And I don't even think we even put a dent in it.
No,
we had about 40, 50 people here. And when you're looking at a pig, you're like, is this going to be enough?
Right.
I mean, there was so much left over. It was more than enough. And I'll tell you, every bite, got better. So
it was good.
From the beans that you could mix it with to the buns you could put it on top of, with the coleslaw that just mixed perfectly with. It was absolutely delicious.
Yeah, I've already had a couple people come by the house today and go out to the garage and get some of the Ziplocs out.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're breaking it down to smaller like portions and freezing it. So yeah, it was a lot of barbecue. And honestly, unfortunately, that was like the best part of the game was the food. The game kind of got away from us. But looking at next year, and we were just talking about how this Philadelphia team is loaded, and they're loaded with young players under contract in big positions such as cornerback, defensive line, quarterback. Barkley's got 2 more years on his deal. If you're a team in the NFL, and let's just take, the Panthers and the Falcons, 2 teams in the NFC South who are in our viewing audience and listening audience. Both teams finished the year solid. The Falcons, finished the year with the big win, and Penix Jr. looks like he's going to be the real deal. Bryce Young, kind of redeemed himself the last 6 or 7 games of the season and finished strong, to where both teams like that feel good about their quarterbacks. They feel good about their running backs, but obviously a hell of a lot more holes. And, Panthers, obviously the defensive line. Falcons, their defense played better this year, but still they've got some issues there. But if you're a team in the NFL, and especially in the NFC, like the Panthers and the Falcons, man, it seems like a huge mountain to overcome. And that doesn't even count some of the other teams in the NFC that are really good, like Detroit, Green Bay, the youngest team in the NFL, so they're only going to get better. But man, if you're looking at your roster today in the NFC, you've got to think that the first thing you have to think of is my offensive line big enough and strong enough to handle that defensive line, number one. Number two, quarterback is obviously a huge deal, and I think the teams that we just named all are pretty solid there. But God, there's so many other things you have to account for.
Well, I mean, you're going to have to go and build, from the foundation up again. And I'll say this, having been on, one of the most explosive offenses in the league with a young coach that was coming up in Mike Martz.
When Frank said that, he was on the greatest show on turf with the Rams.
2001 Rams, the greatest show on turf with players and talent everywhere.
Torrey Holt, Marshall Faulk, Kurt Warner.
Kurt got hurt that next year. So, the difference between one year and the next, we lost the Super Bowl in 2002 to the New England Patriots at the Superdome, back then. And what happened the next year? What took place, and then what's Nick Sirianni going to have to be dealing with? And Mike Martz said this at the time, as he was our coach for the greatest show on turf and the Rams. And it's easy to coach bad teams, and to go out there and when you have a team that's grinding and coming up, and you have some young players, and you're really kind of trying to find your identity and build your worth. It's easy to coach those teams because you know what you do. You go out there and you work hard. You're climbing the mountain. You have great motivation.
Right.
We're going to be gaining and growing and building and making mistakes and hungry. We're hungry to get to the top. But what happens when you get to the top, right? When you're on the top, it's really hard to stay on top, because
everybody's gunning for it.
This is a hard game. Injuries take place.
Mm-hmm.
It is so much harder to coach talent in this league, because you have, the X factor of the injury. I want to get these guys prepared, but I don't want to beat them to the ground, and I don't want to lose the message. How do we keep them hungry, right? Are they self-motivated? Are they guys that are going to continue to push themselves? We just accomplished one of the best things ever. We had lost, and then we had a year in between, and then we found our way to the top. Now what? How am I going to stay hungry? What am I going to say to these guys next year to keep them motivated? And I think Mike Martz did a really good job, because it wasn't about what anybody else did. We had our own standard, and our standard was ourselves. Going out there and competing in practice and doing those things. But Nick Sirianni, as good as he's been in the league 4 years. He's been to 2 Super Bowls. He lost one. Now he's a Super Bowl champ.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to be patting this guy on the back. Everybody's going to be patting,
he's going to get a new contract,
on the back.
Everybody's
going to pat.
Yep.
Yeah. The new money, the new contracts. Everybody's going to want a little bit piece of that.
That's right.
Right. All these guys, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and, some of these other guys that are making plays out there, they're all going to want that big contract. You know why? Because they're now Super Bowl champs.
That's right.
How do you keep this team together? How do you keep them motivated? How do you keep them hungry? That's going to be the biggest challenge of the Eagles. And it's just going to be self-motivation. And can they do it? Can they sustain that? That's what's so impressive about what Brady was able to do with the Patriots.
Or even Kansas City. I mean, getting to 3 straight Super Bowls is that doesn't happen.
But we saw the result.
Yep.
We saw it with the pressure and everybody patting you on the back and the expectations. The pressure changes.
Mm-hmm.
And the pressure is going to be completely different for the Philadelphia Eagles next year. Their schedule is going to be harder.
Yeah.
They're going to have the toughest. They're going to pick worse. They're going to have fewer draft choices or lower draft choices. This league is built for parity,
mm-hmm.
and they're going to try to get these other teams to get to where they're at. How do they do that? Good luck.
I mean,
because
their GM is he's one of the best GMs in the game, and he's a master at not only moving around the draft and picking up and trading picks, but then not missing. I mean, even a guy like Jordan Davis, who started off slower than they thought he was going to be an instant impact, and he really hasn't been. Nolan Smith took some time, as young players it does. Even Jalen Carter at the beginning. Last year they wondered, but man, all of them came into their own this year. And like I said, if I'm a general manager for an NFL team, I got to think if I'm making a pick in the draft and I'm like, I'm 50-50. If it says Georgia or, Florida, any of these SEC, these fast, great, Ohio State team, and any of those teams, I'm going to go that way. If it comes down to 2 guys and 1 guy played, at a smaller school, not that you're not going to find diamond in the rough, but that seems to be what Philadelphia does. They take dudes that play at big programs. Georgia is the main one that we were talking about, but that they know have played under pressure. They know that have pressure. I mean, look, those teams like Georgia, Ohio State, those teams, they have pressure the minute they start the season, because every season they're expected to win the conference as well as get in the playoffs and win a national championship.
Playing in front of hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah. And so the model that he's created in Philadelphia, which a lot of it's not brain science, a lot of it's happened for years and years and years, but he seems to, and he's got an owner, by the way, which is huge, because when you have an owner who also gives you the keys and lets you kind of do your thing, which he does, that's a great thing. And so you're right. I think it is going to, Philadelphia doesn't appear to be going anywhere anytime soon. And so now it is up to these other teams to figure out how you can beat them. And I'm not saying that these teams are going to sit in their conference rooms and go, all right, and specifically say, okay, well, how are we going to stop AJ Brown? How are we going to stop Saquon? But the model that he's created is pretty evident that it works. And so if you're going to,
let's talk about that. What model is it?
Well, first of all, and this is something that's gone back through the history of time. You need to have a good offensive line, a good defensive line, right?
I will take it even a step further, right? When you look at what the Eagles are, they've established an identity,
mm-hmm.
right? And who you are as a football team is probably the most important thing as an owner and a GM that you have to establish and identify. Then you have to go out there and find players that fit that identity.
Yep.
When they got Jalen Hurts, they said, okay, now we have a player. What did they do? They had a great offense. They drafted their asses off.
They've nailed it.
They've nailed the draft. You have to nail the draft.
Yep.
You have to get players that fit your identity. We're going to build a big offensive line. They're going to be athletic. They're not going to go out and spend a bunch of money in free agency. They haven't built this team through free agency. You bring those players on once you have the foundation built, all right? And then you go get your dressing. You get your nice mirrors and your nice paint and all the things that go along with that. And guess who that was? That was Saquon Barkley.
Mm-hmm.
They had all this other stuff. Their identity was established. They went out and got Saquon Barkley to fit that identity to put them over the top. But they had great defense. They drafted Deshaun. The guy, they don't miss. He was a later pick in the first.
Both their DBs are rookies that both were incredible this year.
But they fit in, and they were able to have impact because of what they did up front.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't. So building the foundation is always the key, right? Having identity. This is who we're going to be. We're going to get after guys up front on defense. We're going to go get those dogs that are just athletic and fast and young,
yeah.
and let them eat.
Yeah.
And then we're going to put the window dressing around them after we've built that. Our offensive line, we're going to go get the athletic guys. I mean, it's nice to have a guy that sticks around, and when Lane Johnson sticks around and playing into his 30s, right? But you lose a Hall of Fame center.
Yep.
We go get another guy to fit that bill, but we draft well up front. We get the guys that are going to be more athletic. We're going to be hungry. They're going to be angry. They're going to be mean. And we're going to start running the football.
Yeah.
And we get a quarterback that has the ability to be a great leader, that can run and throw the ball when necessary. And that's the way you build a team. And that's what the Eagles have done. Then you get two guys on the outside that if they decide to stack the box to stop your Saquon Barkley, then you can throw and beat one-on-one. There's nobody better in the game than A.J. Brown, man-to-man coverage. Nobody.
Yeah,
there's nobody better. He's big, he's fast, he's physical. And to cover him one-on-one, you saw the ability for him to kind of Michael Irvin guys, keep his separation, come and make an adjustment to the ball. And those DBs for Kansas City are pretty damn good.
They are. They got one of the best young duos in the league.
He made them look like they couldn't play dead in a cowboy western.
Well, and let's talk about the Panthers for a second. When you're looking at how far they need to go, and again, the Falcons and the Panthers, I think, are on similar tracks right now. They're in a division that I think is winnable next year. I mean, I don't think anybody's scared of Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay's got a very good team. New Orleans, is going to be starting over basically. But the Panthers in particular, they had a bad offensive line for years, the worst in the league. This year, Dan Morgan becomes the general manager. He signs two guards that were really good players. And the offensive line this year was a top 10 offensive line. He fixed it. You did see a difference of what you talked about when you did have big athletic guys on that line that can move. And the Panthers offensive line this year was very good. Chuba Hubbard obviously had a great year behind that line. Breakout year. Bryce at the end of the year, we said last 6-7 games played great. So now
started getting confidence because he wasn't getting hit every 3 seconds.
Exactly. And so now if you're looking at a team like the Panthers, defense, everybody know your defense get more points than anybody in the history of the NFL, right? So it doesn't take,
a rocket
scientist to figure out what they need to fix. The good news is if you're the Panthers, you're getting Derek Brown back, Pro Bowl defensive lineman. They've got a lot of work. They've got linebackers. They need other DBs. So they're not, Falcons, same thing.
They are not one Saquon Barkley away from being an impact team consistently.
Correct. But the one thing that they do have, and again, the Falcons I would put in this category too, is they do have a good core of young players at important positions that if they hit in the draft and if they hit the proper free agents, and if they also the guys that have been there, whether it be practice squad or young guys, if they continue to grow those players, then both teams, in my opinion, I mean, the Falcons this year with the playoffs had it right there at their doorstep and couldn't win the game. But I think both those teams have a chance to at least fight for the division. But man, when you look at the division now compared to Philadelphia, it's like, man, if we're getting that Philadelphia for the next 5 years, and again, look, not the best teams don't always win. We see that pretty much, the Bills, everybody this year thought might have been the best team. And we can go on throughout. When you guys lost to the Patriots in the Super Bowl for Brady's first Super Bowl title, you guys were a 14-point favorite. So we know that things, on paper, aren't always what happened. But I do think that if you're a team like the Panthers or the Falcons or some of these other teams, San Diego, some of these other teams that are on the verge, maybe we're in the playoffs this year, you at least have a very clear picture of what you've got to do to compete. Kansas City's been that team that people were looking at like that, right? To beat. And then Philadelphia knew what they had to do. They did it. And now they're the ones that everyone's going to be aiming for.
They were built differently. They were built differently than any other team that Kansas City had played. And that starts with the defensive line. There was not another defensive line that Kansas City saw that matched what the Philadelphia Eagles were able to do. And that's where sometimes free agency, we talk about it, trying to build our roster. It's a good thing for the league because not only can I build my roster, I can take away from yours.
Right.
So trying to find that next guy is always the challenge, right? And that's why the draft is so important, or the depth that you have from the draft is so important. You used to be able to see it years ago where the next star was just waiting in the wings. No longer does that happen. Guys, because of the amount of money that they're making, are forced to come in and play. And then when those older guys are weeded out, they're gone. They become dinosaurs. Free agency has allowed other teams to be able to cherry pick the guys they want, whether it's the left tackle for the Eagles, or this one of those defensive tackles. They're going to go find that guy and they're going to pay him.
Yeah.
They're going to overpay him, not just because it's going to help bolster me, but it's going to take away from you.
Yeah.
And now you're going to have to find his replacement, which good luck. You're going to have to find the next Jalen Carter. They don't make them like that. There's, the explosiveness. He's the next Aaron Donald. At least that's what he showed throughout the playoffs.
Oh yeah.
He was the impact player that, comes around, once every 10 years, a generational player. And he played like that. So
there's a lot of teams.
if I'm the Redskins, if I'm another team that's feels like I have a lot of pieces in place, those are the type of guys that you go try to cherry pick off of that Eagles team. And that's why Nick Sirianni and the Eagles are going to have a tough time holding that team together,
the depth in particular,
because of the depth and the amount of guys that they're going to take from that team. So that's going to be their challenge. Now, how do you compete against that? You got to go draft. You can start. It's going to take time. Who's the teams in the NFL right now in the NFC that have the identity to go up and match what the Eagles are doing?
The closest team that I could think of, and injuries crushed them this year. And I'm still not saying they would have beat Philadelphia, but Detroit has a very good offensive line. They've got a great running game. They got a quarterback who can throw the ball. They get fast receivers everywhere. They got a good tight end. Their defense was just beaten up. They lost Hutchins. They lost really good players. A lot of players on defense that really hurt them. I think that they are very close to patching in a few holes. Now, the other thing with those guys are they also lost both coordinators to head coaching jobs, which some people don't think that's a big deal. You can talk on that more than I can, but I do think in certain cases it's a big deal.
Kellen Moore, for the Eagles is going to be a big loss because he understood the identity. He had a relationship with Jalen Hurts and Saquon and AJ Brown and Devontae Adams. He knew, what their best plays were. He established that, throughout the years that he's been with those guys. So in a crunch situation, these are the plays that work best for him. He understands. He speaks my language. We don't have to really, communicate and verbalize everything. There's certain things that
he knows the player call that I'm going to be comfortable with in this situation.
Correct. So that's going to be an important factor in moving forward with those. But the coordinators are a small piece of that. It's the players that are going to be the bigger piece of that.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with you. The Detroit Lions are the most physically inept or a team, the next team to compete. They're not inept. They're able to go out there and be that next team that goes out there. And the one thing, in my opinion, that they're lacking is that the quarterback, because Jared Goff had a great season.
Yeah,
he really did. He had a really good season. He was up for NFL Offensive Player of the Year because of the season he had. They threw the ball everywhere. But in this NFL, you just saw the difference between a quarterback that has the ability to run and keep plays alive and get those first downs and touchdowns when necessary. I think if the Detroit Lions are going to compete against the Philadelphia Eagles, they got to get a guy that's going to be able to move and make plays within the pocket. And Goff isn't that guy.
No, he moves better than I think he gets credit for. But
he's not that guy.
He ain't that guy.
He's not that guy that's going to take it. He's not.
The good thing he does have though is he's got 4-3 guys all over that field. So for instance, Gibbs, Williams. They got fast dudes everywhere. So
do the Eagles.
That's true.
On the defensive side.
That's true.
So when I play my zone defense and I let those guys eat up front, who has the ability? Goff ain't getting away from those guys.
No, the good thing is Detroit probably has the second best offensive line in the league. So at least they've got a chance.
So that's where you start. Is I have to go build an offensive line that's going to match that defensive line for the Eagles. That's the way the NFL works. It's a copycat league. The Eagles did this, and this. How do we copy that? Well, and that's going to be the challenge. But I do think the Detroit Lions, minus the quarterback, are the best equipped to be able to do that.
Yeah, they just got to get healthy on defense and add some holes there. But I think they're not far. But they'd be the only team in the NFC that I would say that about. I don't think anyone else. The Redskins, listen, they had a hell of a year, and Jaden Daniels
55.
is a difference maker, man. He is a stud. Now, they've got a lot of holes. They got to fit. And look, they did that in Quinn's first year, the GM's first year, the new ownership's first year. So they obviously put in a program that is on the right track. And so they're gonna be around. They're gonna be dangerous, but I think they're a few years away.
The Redskins can score with anybody, no doubt about it, because they have a guy at that position that has the ability to make guys miss, that can be elusive, and that can throw the ball down the field. Where the Redskins lost that game against the Eagles, 55 points.
Yeah.
Saquon rushed for 200, and it could have rushed for 300.
Yeah.
They didn't have an answer for AJ Brown
I think that game,
or Barkley.
I think that game, and obviously, you know, both defensive coordinators we've talked about have had illustrious careers or whatever. And this was Fangio's first Super Bowl win, I believe. But, you know, you got to believe that when Spagnuolo watched what Saquon did against Washington, really what he's done the whole season. But, you know, what we talked about this, when Washington or some of these teams would try a run blitz or would try something where really it came down to the dude that's blitzing better make the tackle, because if he doesn't, Saquon's gone. And guys are having a hard time bringing him down, and we saw that. So with Spagnuolo yesterday, Kansas City did a great job. The dudes that had to make those tackles made them for the most part, but they didn't have enough when it came to keeping up with Hurts running the ball or on the run, like you said, when he was forced out of the pocket. Mahomes was so uncomfortable, which again, most quarterbacks are going to be uncomfortable. All quarterbacks are going to be uncomfortable when you move them off their spot. Mahomes is one of those quarterbacks that usually is fine off his spot, whether he's throwing sidearm over his head. You know, he had one of those little jump passes yesterday. He figures it out. But against these dudes with that kind of speed, he really struggled. And
they kept Mahomes in the pocket for the most part.
They did. And when he had to move out, he was in trouble.
Yep, because they had speed that can catch.
Exactly.
They didn't have to break off of their zones. They could stay in their zones because they knew those guys up front were able to track him down and hunt him down.
So what I'm saying here, just to be clear, is this. Panthers, Falcons, any of these teams, draft defense, please. Don't draft. I know the Panthers could use another receiver, and I know you don't pick for need, but there's going to be some damn good defensive players available when Panthers, Falcons, you know, Giants, any of these teams in these divisions in the NFC we're talking about.
Build inside out.
Yeah, man. Load up on defense.
Look at the Eagles. Inside, who do they have?
Oh, I mean, they got the best
Carter and Davis. I mean, good luck running the ball up the middle against these guys.
Yeah.
They also have guys. Both those guys could push the pocket. 3 technique. So you rush the guys up the field. You don't need all those guys. You have those guys with what you can go out and get in free agency or the draft. You might even have them on your team. But the guys that nobody else has is those 2 guys in the middle.
Yeah, and they're not easy to find. Everybody would have them.
And that's where, if I'm the Panthers, Derek Brown could be that guy.
Yeah, right? I mean,
but I need to go find another guy to match that.
Yeah, they've got Robinson, who's a good run stopper next to him. They need one more, and Mason Graham to me would be a great pickup in the draft for them if he's there. Doubt he will be. But we're going to take one more break, and then we're going to come back. We're going to finish up a little bit on the weekend that was college hoops, because there was some great games with a lot of the teams, especially down here in the South. So we're going to touch base on that, and then we'll wrap it up. But we'll be right back on Suit Up Sports.
You're listening to Suit Up Sports. Suit Up Sports. Here's your host, DJ The Suit Stout.
Welcome back to Suit Up Sports. DJ The Suit Stout, Frank Garcia. We're going to dive a little bit into some college basketball now. We just covered the Super Bowl. And we'll, to close out the NFL Super Bowl talk.
How do you believe it's over?
I was going to say, man, that's the thing about today. You have to wake up and understand that football's gone for a while, and it stinks. And you know, we both watch golf and NASCAR. So, you know, I'm a huge baseball guy. So when baseball starts up, I'm happy. But it isn't the same, because when it's football season, your entire weekend,
you're looking
starting on about Thursday, is planned out with your football team.
Yep.
And it really is what we're cooking, whose house we're doing it, what we're drinking, what time are the games, how many TVs are we going to have up, you know, who's coming over, who's bringing this, who's bringing that. And now I kind of compare it to when you're coaching your kids, or whether your kids are playing sports, and even if you're not coaching, and every weekend you're at a field at 8 a.m, and then you're there until Sunday at 7 o'clock at night or whatever, and you're sitting in the sun, you're sweating, you're going to fast food joints between games to keep the kids happy, you're staying at hotels, and then when that's over, the season's over, you're like, oh man, I can sleep in this weekend. Like, I can actually just take it easy.
You do that for about 2 weeks, and then you're like, what the hell do I do with myself?
Right. That's the problem. The first couple weeks of it's great, then you start missing it, and
Yeah.
so football, we're lucky that at least the draft's in April. So now we'll kind of free agency first. So you'll kind of get into the free agency period where teams will do what they got to do there, and then the draft they'll fill more holes. So that gets us through April, and so really May and June are the 2 months that you get no football. July you at least get camp starting a lot, mid July, late July. But yeah, man, when you wake up the day after the Super Bowl, you normally have a few cobwebs anyway, and then you realize that football's gone for a while.
Well, the NFL, like you said, has done a really good job of extending that looking forward to feeling. And you're right. It's going to be free agency. It'll be the draft. Everybody will start talking about those things. And fortunately for us, we're big sports fans. So, Major League Baseball is right around the corner, spring training and, all those things. But college basketball is kind of like, okay, what's next? And, like March Madness is almost here. So,
Yep.
Now I know you're a gambler. I'm a gambler. A lot of people out there probably listening like to wager a little bit on things just to kind of keep it interesting. Whether it's $1, $100, whatever it might be, everybody's a little different as far as that goes. But that's now where you kind of like do your homework.
Yeah.
This is the homework time for March Madness. Why is this team going to be good? Why is that team going to be good?
Yep.
What's conference is going to be the most dominant? And, a lot of times in March Madness, you start seeing these brackets come out and, these conferences make runs. And the strongest conference is going to go out there. And right now, I haven't really watched a ton of college basketball, but the last couple of weeks, we started watching a little bit more.
Yeah. You definitely make that transition. When the playoffs start and the NFL and then the college playoffs are done, which they last longer now than they used to, obviously, you do find yourself kind of diving a little harder into college basketball. And the one thing that I've said before, in the past few weeks about college basketball right now is with all the portal and all the NIL and all those things that have created all these different challenges when it comes to college athletics, the college basketball product right now, to me anyway, is as good as it's been in a long time. And is it back when Duke had Leitner and Hurley and Carolina had all those teams, whether it be Antoine Jameson, Vince Carter, whoever, is it that competitive? No. Is it that kind of basketball? No. But it's really good. And there are these young players that come into college basketball right now, where they used to be able to kind of take their time. You'd have some freshmen that would start, but even when they would, usually they were the second or third option on offense and didn't play good enough defense. So the coach is yanking them out here and there to get on their butts about how they play defense. Well, now these kids, because of all the things that they have at their, whether it be training, the off-season stuff, the diet stuff, and the fact that these kids know that they're going to start getting paid immediately. These kids are coming in and they're competing against kids their own age in college now because the really good ones are out of there after 1 year. But man, these kids can play. And you look at, just this weekend when we watched Tennessee and you saw their point guard, Ziegler, I probably screwed up his name, just take control of that game and was on fire from 3-point land, which is really not his forte. And then you watch Duke and even in a loss, you see, Cup struggled, but down the stretch hit some big shots. But Clemson's veteran point guard, made even bigger shots and
came up with a great defensive play at the end of the game to keep them from tying the game up.
Exactly. And then you see a team like Florida, go into Auburn. And again, young team. I mean, Auburn's got some great veterans on that team too, but Florida goes in there and
Florida has a couple of really good wins and dominant performances.
The SEC, and Jay Billis said this last week. He said that you could argue that winning the SEC tournament in basketball will be harder than winning the NCAA tournament. And the reason he says that is if you go look down all the teams in the SEC and who they're going to have to play, they're going to be playing top 10 teams in some cases every day. Well, top 20 teams for sure.
4 of the top 5 teams right now in college basketball are from the SEC.
It's nuts.
Alabama, you have Auburn, you have Florida and Tennessee.
Yeah.
And then you have a 6 or 7 or an 8 with A&M.
A&M at 8.
I mean, you got Kentucky still to mention, and Vanderbilt's still pretty good.
Had a big win this weekend.
Missouri's still pretty good. So there's 8 teams right there that could beat anybody any given night if you don't show up. So I think there's a lot of reasons for that, and I think it has to do with I don't think it's the history and tradition that exists in the SEC when it comes to basketball. I mean, there's been some good teams. Kentucky's always been one of those blue blood programs.
Florida had a back-to-back.
Yeah, Florida had a nice little run.
Yep.
Alabama is starting to creep up. But Tennessee.
I mean, ever since Bruce Pearl's been at Auburn.
Auburn has never been a basketball school until Bruce Pearl got there. Tennessee, was before, but you're starting to see a little bit more consistent. And I think a lot of it has to do with the amount of money that they're generating, through football and the revenue sharing and just building these big stadiums and the amount of money that they have at their disposal compared to some of these other programs, the ACC or the Pac-12, even the Big Ten, that they have the ability to go out there and spend on these NIL players. So they're able to get the best players because of the best recruiting, because of the biggest facilities, and their results are, the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, and then you see these teams who are very young, and I'll use Duke for an example. Then you compare them to some of these teams who have some veterans on there, and Auburn's one of those teams. Tennessee is one of those teams, and Duke has, Proctor. They've got a couple kids that have also played a year or so, because that's the problem with the portal and the NIL is this goes for any sport, is just keeping your depth, because the kids get there and if they're not playing, they're gone. And that's whether it be football, basketball, baseball, whatever. So it's hard to keep depth there. So when you can keep a kid there 2-3, like RJ Davis or the Tar Heels, or we've seen how Baycott not being a Tar Heel this year has really what he really meant to that team, because they have no inside presence where with him, they didn't have to worry about that. He was going to get his 12 rebounds. He was going to play tough defense, and when you lose a veteran like that, you really see it now. And then when you compare it to a team who has a couple of vets that can play, UConn, you're looking at them right now, they won back-to-back national championships. They had guys all over the draft this past time going, right? Castle and then the big kid. So it's hard to reload. And in college basketball, when your roster is a lot smaller, you got kids leaving if they're not playing. The kids these days are different anyway when it comes to coaching and how you can coach them and how prepared they are. And then, in college sports, where they ever had to win before, like the way these kids get coddled now, when you're recruiting somebody, where do they have a challenge? The pros really have to look at that now, because you hear a lot of these pro scouts, a lot of these pro NFL coaches and general managers, and then veteran players say that when these young kids get to us, a lot of times they've never been challenged.
Mm-hmm.
They've never had to work their butt off.
Mm-hmm.
They've never had to worry about playing time or getting benched or getting a coach up their butt yelling at them. And have they ever had to fight to win? And you get that when you've got veterans on a basketball team. So that's what's really interesting to me, is with a lot of these teams that we just mentioned in the top 5, top 10, they all have obviously a lot of youth that they're working in there, because that's just where we are in the day of NCAA basketball. And when you see a team like Florida go to Auburn, and Florida also whooped Tennessee earlier in the season at home when in Florida, when Tennessee was number 1, when they're mixing these young guys out there. And again, I still think Auburn's the best team. So, Duke is obviously going to be up there. I said you and Auburn lost this weekend. It seems this year when one or two of these top ranked teams lose, it seems like several of them lose. And then Duke, lost to a good Clemson team. Clemson's good. They've got vets. They're tough. They're not going to wow you athletically, but man, they know how to play. That guy can coach. They hustle. So yeah, college basketball right now, to me anyway, is in good shape. And to get back to your point, is when the Super Bowl is over and football is gone for a while, the draft and free agency obviously keep our attention, but March Madness is still the best sporting event in sports, most likely, because number one, it lasts over a month. It's a period of time, where the Super Bowl is one day, and I know,
but you have the playoffs.
You do have the playoffs in the NFL. That's true. And again, obviously, the Super Bowl is the biggest game in all sports. But when you start creeping towards the tournaments, especially when you're somebody who grew up in the South, where the TVs were rolled into your room, your classroom in 3rd grade and 5th grade to watch the ACC tournament, or whatever, wherever you live, depending on what you watch. But when you start getting to conference tournament time, that excitement that you have, especially, like I said, if you were in the South, and I'm sure other parts of the country have the same thing, but I think for me anyway, the last few years, I had just not been taken in by college basketball, and I'm a huge Duke fan. And so it's not like my team's not competitive. They're always pretty good, but the basketball to me was just bad. This year, I feel like the basketball is really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing a lot more dominant teams, and because of the recruiting, because of AAU, because of the amount of games that they play before they get to college. You just mentioned it, being on the baseball field, how many games will we play in a weekend? I mean, sometimes we play 5-6 games. These guys are playing so many games now that, it's not uncommon for them to get blown out in one of those games and to really kind of, almost plan or prepare for a loss. And that's kind of the message, unfortunately, that we're teaching our youth is that, we're going to prepare for these losses. We're going to kind of pitch this guy. And if we lose this game, then it's not really a big deal. We're going to get blown out because we're going to win. We're going to really prepare to win these other 5 games. So, these aren't uncommon things. The games aren't as important whereas when it used to go, it was you play 3 games and every game mattered. Same things happening in college basketball. Every game mattered. You have so many games now that you can lose 2 or 3 games and it really not have that impact. I think the other thing that I really enjoy about college basketball compared to, professional sports is the underdog, the Sweet 16, the Cinderella story. That's to me what makes college basketball different is that you never know who that team's going to be with that special player that comes out of nowhere. And you look at Gonzaga. Back when they first start, now that they're a perennial powerhouse, when they first came on to the scene, Gonzaga was beating and upsetting, Arizona and some of these other, blue blood teams. Butler is another team. You look at what they were able to do, and making it all the way to a national championship where damn near, beat Duke.
Court shot
court shot away from beating Duke.
Gordon Hayward.
With Gordon Hayward and what he was able to do. So, I don't know if this year has, or at least I haven't seen it yet, those Cinderella stories or those teams that, are kind of up and coming, or those programs that are up and coming. What you're seeing is more of the consistency. It's almost turning into, more of like what it used to be with the blue blood programs, making those deep runs because of their battle tested. When you had the Big East, when you had Syracuse and you had Georgetown and you had St. John's and you had Villanova and everybody was good, and winning the Big East was just as hard as winning the tournament because of how the way that they had to do it, the amount of games that they played. When Kemba Walker was at UConn, and what he had to do to win the Big East.
Yeah, they came through the losers.
They ran the gauntlet.
Yeah, they did.
They won they ran the gauntlet, and they had to beat everybody. And he was able to do that. So it showed you that the toughness that Kemba Walker had as an undersized player. So when he got to the league, he was still able to have that consistency, and why he was an all-star, why he's maybe one of the best Hornets to ever play. But, we're not seeing those players maybe as much. We're seeing Cooper Flags. We're seeing those guys come up. But, when you look at the Floridas, the Auburns, there's going to be some good players, but are they going to be sustainable? Are we going to be able to see those guys, as they go into the pros and watch those guys? And that's what I'm excited to watch and find out who those players are. So when they get to the NBA, I'm going to have a little rooting interest because I've seen him play. Steph Curry was another guy, for me, that we saw at Davidson, right? When he was at Davidson, we saw him play and make that deep run into the Elite Eight where they just barely lost to Georgetown when they had a damn good team. And what he was able to do and the impact that he had and what he's able to sustain now in the NBA, we're hoping to see some of these guys, these younger players, maybe be able to have a longer, sustainable career where, they're common names in everyday households.
Well, and that's the thing when these guys leave after a year, you don't get to know them. When we grew up, these guys were there for 3 or 4 years. You knew everything about them. And when they went to the NBA, you could name every player on an NBA bench and where they went to college. Now they're there 1 year. So you really don't. There's times where I've been watching the NBA game where they say so-and-so from Duke University. I'm going, how the hell did I miss him?
Right.
And then I look him up and he played, 12 minutes a game and got drafted late in the first round or early in the second round. And now he becomes a player because he's had 2 years on the bench practice. And
Trajan Langdon, was one of those guys. Yeah, he was a 6th man for Duke. Went to have a long career in the NFL.
And now he's in the NBA. And now he's a general
and the NBA.
And that's the other thing too about March Madness with the portal and the NIL. The one thing that it has created that it's kind of it's good and bad. So it's bad from what we just talked about, lack of depth and things of that nature. But it is good because we have seen more upsets. We've seen a 16 beat a 1. We've seen a 15 beat a 2. We've seen teams like what was it, Loyola Chicago, I believe, making these runs. And because if they are lucky, if a team and a coach is lucky enough to have some veteran players that have been there, BYU this year is kind of a team like that. They've got some vets that have been around.
I mean, of course they do. They're 42 years old.
Well, that's true. That's true.
You go to BYU.
And right now, a lot of these guys you're hearing, this is a 6-year senior.
Right. They've gone on their missions. They're coming back. They got 2 kids and 4 wives. Of course, they're going to be a veteran players.
Well, the teams that have the veteran players, though, that do kind of catch light in the bottle. Maybe it's just having one of those dudes get hot for 3-4 weeks, or watching these young guys grow into their roles. I mean, there a lot of these teams, Alabama, Duke, Auburn, some of these young dudes that take over now. Broom for Auburn, arguably the player of the year, and so they've got a guy like that not many teams have. But that's what I'm looking for when I'm watching college hoops leading up to the conference tournaments. That's kind of what you look for. Now, like you said, we're kind of like enjoying the games. We're kind of scouting, like, all right, what team is going to be one of my upset picks? What player can carry a team on his back that might be a veteran? Maybe it is young guys. I mean, look, we've seen young guys do it too. I mean, some of these guys are special.
I mean, just think about some of the teams in past, like University of Charleston, when they made their run, or St. Mary's, or who was the team out of California when they were just run and gun, and Loyola Marymount, Hank. I mean, look at the teams that they had then, and like I said, Gonzaga and Butler. Yep. You probably go on and on with some of those great memories of teams that made those deep runs. They may have not won the national championship or got there, but the story that went with them. Who's going to be that team this year? Because that's the one thing that I'm looking for as I'm getting more into college basketball now. Because the Duke's going to be there, that Auburn's going to be there, that Florida's going to be there, Tennessee's going to be there. They're going to be the powerhouse teams because they play in the best conferences. But who's going to be the team that nobody's talking about that challenges them? That's the one. Whether it's a St. Mary's or a team that
Creighton, teams like that,
right? You remember, the run that they had. They ended up beating Duke. Is there how many upsets are there going to be? Is there going to be a 16 beating a 1 this year? Right. Those are the stories that. We don't really necessarily see because they're not going to be the biggest televised games. But when it comes to tournament time, you watch them play and gosh, there's a bunch of seniors out there.
That's right.
There's one, they got a great point guard and they got long guys that can rebound, and if you have those things, you can beat a team any given night in college basketball.
That's it. One thing I also want to say about college basketball that I thought was pretty cool this weekend was Dick Vitale returning to the broadcast booth. We both have been lucky enough to work with Dick over the years, and
had him on several times.
Had him on our shows, and literally, whether you like his broadcasting or not, he truly is one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Would go out of his way to come on the show when he could, and the passion that he has for the game is undeniable. So I could see how some people go, oh my God, Vitale's doing the game, turn it down. I've never been that guy. There are times where I go, oh my God, how many more words is he going to make up with the baby, energy, enthusiasm, and that kind of stuff. At some point, you're like, all right, whatever. But seeing him make the return this weekend after 2 years of fighting cancer and ups and downs, and having his wife and daughters there, and his voice, obviously,
the support that he got from everybody,
players and the officiating crew, and then hearing him talk, his voice you could pick out of anywhere. And now, he wasn't even allowed to talk for 8 months while going through all this chemo and the cancer stuff. So his voice sounds a little weathered, and you could definitely see he looks older and maybe not as stable from a physical standpoint when he's getting excited, but the enthusiasm was still there. And look, it was a Duke loss, right? So everyone who hates Duke likes to always go, oh, Vitale loves Duke. Vitale loves Duke. So when he was announced back, when he was making his comeback game at a Duke game, I'm sure some people go, oh, of course it's a Duke game. And then he makes his comeback game and then Duke loses. So, it was funny to me because I've never bought into the Duke stuff, just like I never really bought into the officiating stuff with Kansas City. Dick Vitale just loves great players and he loves great basketball. And you know how fans get it. Kirk Herbstreit's another example of this. Went to Ohio State, but damn if the
always
Ohio
a homer,
State
always a homer.
Yeah,
right.
He's a homer if you hate Ohio State, and then the Ohio State fans, he doesn't talk enough. He can't win. One of his kids now just went on a visit to Michigan, and they posted his son wearing a Michigan jersey, and Kurt, and
sure he's getting death threats.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they win the national championship, and he's crying on the air because he's so happy for his other son, who's a coach's assistant or whatever.
His alma mater, yeah.
Yeah. So there's certain things you can't win on, but having Dick Vitale back was great. He's great for the game of college basketball. I thought that his analysis during the game, which we try to keep things loose. No one wants to dive too deep into X's and O's, and as you guys will see who haven't watched our podcast or listened to our podcast or watch us on TV. We tend to get a lot looser and with certain subjects, but Vitale to me didn't really miss a beat. He obviously he was very well prepared. He's obviously still been watching hoops, and his level of being prepared was great. So you wonder about that. Going through chemo, being gone that long, was he able to even watch these games? And if he was able to watch them, was he able to physically sit there and write notes or whatever he does to prepare? But he sounded great, and overall, it was just great to have him back. And I hope he.
There's certain commentators that are synonymous from what they do, right? And he's absolutely one of them. And you look at Jim Nantz,
Yep.
with the Masters, or college basketball, or even the NFL with Tony Romo and what he does, or Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. They're synonymous with the NFL and big games.
Or Tom Brady now, who called his first Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not convinced Tom Brady synonymous with being an announcer yet. But
that's what I was going to ask you, because obviously he's not after 1 year, but I'll give him credit. I do think he got better as year went on. Is he better than Greg Olson, which is who he's going to get compared to? Because when he came in, he took Greg's spot. No, he's not better than.
He's
Greg
better than
Olson.
Romo.
He's better. I would agree.
He's way better than Romo.
Romo has declined, whereas I thought Brady got better during the year. Greg Olson, to me, is the best color analyst out there. He really is. He just, to me, and he has a great way of painting what he's seeing to a viewer who doesn't have the knowledge that he has on football. And I think that's hard to do. And I think he does a great job of it.
And I also think, to your point, and to give Greg credit as well, there doesn't seem to be any bias. It's just about analyzing the games. Yeah. I would say, for me right now, the best crew in the game is Aikman and Buck, right? When you look at the two tandems together.
Yep.
I do not like any more Nance, because I think the game has gotten too fast for him. I think some of the calls have gotten out of control, and Romo is just over the top too much.
You just never know what you're going to get with Romo.
Well, I mean, I'm not a big Tony Romo fan, and when I think he came out, he was still fresh from the NFL, but I think that it's easy to see, when you listen to him evaluate a game and to talk about the critical situations in the game and what you should do as a quarterback, and what the other team is thinking. That's really the value to me that the ex-players bring. And to manage a game and the lack of decision making that he has at that position when he played that position, to me, is the most striking thing, which it's understandable why he never won a playoff game, right? Because of his lack of ability to really kind of diagnose a game in a critical situation with what the coach is thinking and what the players should be thinking. Where Greg, to me, on the other hand, really does a great job of that. Aikman does a great job of that. And those two guys, to me, because of that, are the best. And I'd love to hear Tom Brady, what his thoughts were. And, I think Brady's better in a one-on-one setting, than he is maybe live on air. I think Greg right now is to me probably, my favorite guy to listen to. But other than that, when it comes back to Dickie V and, what he does with basketball, yeah, he can get old after a while, but I think, the commentary he provides, the stories that he tells, and the way he presents himself is still synonymous with college basketball.
Yeah, it was great. And, college basketball over the years, when we grew up, at least, Billy Packer was synonymous with, and again, great passion for the game, love the game. And I forget the number of NCAA tournaments he was a part of, but it was a lot. Not to mention, again, growing up in Charlotte, the weekly ACC, I think it was Tuesday night games, Thacker and Packer. Dick Vitale's a guy you think like that. Bill, Rafferman, Rafferman, I screwed his name up.
Well, I mean, think about the baseball guys. I mean, you're good. You're big with baseball. Harry Carey, I mean, is one of those guys synonymous, with the Cubs, and
Well, and basketball is different because, and I'm talking every team has their own announcers, right? So,
Atlanta,
yeah, every team has their own play-by-play, their own color announcers, and then some of those guys do national games and things like that. And so you do get to know some of the. Kevin Burkhart's a great example. Kevin Burkhart, who I think is outstanding play-by-play guy, whether it be baseball or football. But again, did the Super Bowl yesterday with Brady, the Super Bowl last year with Olsen. But he was like a sideline reporter for the Mets. So I would watch Mets games, and he would just do these sideline reports, sometimes going and interviewing somebody's parents in the stands, or, whatever they were, sometimes funny, sometimes updates on an injury or whatever the case may be. But he always was great. And you knew at some point he was going to be somewhere else, and I didn't think that he would rise as quickly as he did through Fox to be the number one guy. Now, Aikman and Buck leaving, like you said, go over to ESPN for Monday Night Football definitely had a part in that, but he does a great job. And I think Brady has improved, but you look at the NFL or you look at basketball, just NFL will stay on topic with Brady, John Madden. Like we can sit here right now and name 4 or 5 dudes that called games. I mean, going back a long time, that called games that we grew up with that had a comfort level where they're gonna make you laugh a little bit. They're not gonna make it too serious. Romo, I think almost, especially after he got that big contract, when he got that new contract where it was paying him like, what is it, 25 million or 30 million a year. It seemed to me, and we'll put this, I'll compare this to a player. The Eagles. Let's talk about the Eagles or any of these teams, Kansas City Chiefs. When they get paid, you never know whose heart is still going to beat hard enough to want to kick people's butts and win. And I think even in broadcasting where, look, Romo knows football, he knows the players, but you've got to prep. I mean, you've got to know a lot more than just, what this route is and why this player is good. You got to know the guys on the bench if they come in. And it seems to me, and I heard a story that CBS executives even flew to Romo's house, I want to say before last season, to talk to him about, hey, look, we need you to tighten it up, because it seems as if you've kind of went down. Because his first year or two, he was great. I really thought he was, I can't stand the Cowboys.
But he was exciting. He gave you insight, and he had a stick which he could call the play because he was doing his homework. He would go into, and he just, like I said, he was fresh off of, kind of playing against these teams. So the research that he was doing was just basically like a game plan that he had already, went through, where, he didn't really have to go and figure out what these guys were doing and, how they changed. Now it's 4, 5, 6, 7 years into it. Game plans have changed, teams have changed, and the things that you once knew about these teams are completely different about them now because their identity has changed.
Yeah, no doubt. So that the announcing part to me has always been interesting. I've done that before over the years. I was a color analyst for high school basketball and things like that, and I never will even watch those tapes again because I
realized you had a voice you had a face for radio.
Yeah,
now that we're on TV, and
yeah, no doubt. And that was when I had hair and clean shaven face. But yeah, it was good to hear Dickie V back. Some good ACC games this week. And you got the Tar Heels who are struggling to stay alive.
they're done.
They're all
done.
They're I'm not going to say they're done.
Tar Heels have zero chance of making the postseason.
I think you're crazy. I think they have a chance. Number one, I think they have a chance because in the tournament, you never know. They also have talent. They've played very good teams very well. However, they are struggling right now. They're missing something.
Did you watch them against Duke? Obviously,
I did,
because we sat here and watched it together. They looked as overmatched as any team in college basketball.
They did that game, but they also played against Florida, and it was a 3 or 4 point game.
Lost.
Kansas. No, they were all. That's the thing they don't have. They don't have a big win. That's their hurdle to getting in the tournament. They have to go on a run of big wins. Now tonight or this week they're at Clemson. Tonight they're at Clemson. Clemson coming off a big home win against
them.
Duke.
Beating Clemson is not going to catapult them into the NCAA.
It wouldn't, but it would be their first big win, if their first quality victory of the year. And they've got plenty of teams left ahead of them to build on. I'm not saying that they're going to be a
what do they call them? Quad one wins?
They have none.
0.
Yep. And you're right. And so there's a lot of teams that are going to get edged, that have an edge over them because of that. However, I'm not ready to say there's no shot. I mean, they're still probably first 10 out. So they still have a shot. They've played teams well, and they played good enough teams the rest of the way with their schedule that they could get some big wins tonight against Clemson.
The only
one of them.
chance Carolina has to get in the tournament is to win the ACC. Period. They're not getting in unless they win the ACC.
I think it's
which
too early
they
to
aren't
say
doing.
that. I think it's too early to say that. I'm not saying they're going to win the tournament, but like I said, if you look at the majority of their losses, and again, for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I can't stand the Tar Heels. I'm not a Tar Heel fan. Grew up in Charlotte my entire life, and I'm not a Tar Heel fan. But when I'm being objective, which I am, they have talent. They lack a big man.
There's a difference between being objective and being realistic.
I'm being realistic. Their losses are against some of the best teams in college basketball this year. They definitely are missing something, not just a big man. There's something, it seems, chemistry-wise. I don't understand why Jackson.
It's called talent.
I mean, they've got R.J. Davis.
They got nobody that can create. Against Duke, who's obviously light years ahead of them. They made them look like they couldn't dribble and shoot.
Duke's a bad example. You can't just paint their season.
That's their
Duke
standard.
Game. No, but you can't paint their entire season off of a Duke game.
I can, because when you look at
if
Carolina,
you watch them play against,
we thought that game, we had a podcast on that you said we wouldn't be surprised if this was a one-score game and Carolina was able to stay with them. You said that.
I took Carolina plus 10 points. I thought there was no way it would be a 10-point game.
And it was a 31-point ass whooping.
It could have been 40.
And it could have been 40.
But
Duke
I'm not
pulled off and allowed Carolina to come back to within 17, I believe is what the final score was. But them beating by 17. But that game wasn't close. It was like the Super Bowl blowout.
But you can't paint. But you can't paint, in my opinion, you can't paint the entire season.
They haven't had they've 0 quad 1 wins.
I'm with you. And like I said, I'm not saying it's an easy track. I mean, for them to get in the tournament, they've got to start winning games. They really can't lose anymore. And they certainly can't lose to teams that aren't a quad. I mean, they've got to start winning games.
So when are you willing to say that they're out? Is it tonight after they lose to Clemson?
I would say in the next couple weeks, if they don't string, they've got to
next couple.
They can't lose. Yeah, I think they can't lose. They've got to win. They got to start winning ball games, and it starts with Clemson. Listen, they may be walking into Little John Arena and Coliseum, and they may be facing this Clemson team who lost to Georgia Tech at home. 4 days before they lost to Duke. Now they're coming off a huge win at home, and they rush the court. The Duke coaches are out there bowing dudes around to keep the players safe. A great night if you're a Clemson fan. So if you are a Tar Heel fan and you have to start a winning streak and you really can't afford to lose anymore, and you have to start getting some quality wins, tonight's the night. It might work out. You might run into a Clemson team that's going to have a letdown. Clemson's not a team that's really going to blow you out. But then again, Carolina has a hard time scoring the ball sometimes. So we'll see. But I'm not ready to say they're definitely out. They were just last week, they were in the first 4 in. So, I'm not ready to say they're out of it, but they have to start winning games. You're totally right. And they're going to have a chance to. Clemson will be a quality of it. They got Duke at home to end the season as usual. And they've got some other games.
It's another 30-point win.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, if they're going to give me 10 points in that game, I'm going to take it too.
Who's the team that they're going to play in these next? They play at Clemson, at Stanford.
Okay, well, there's a good start. Both of them. Stanford beat them already once this year at Carolina. Clemson, obviously.
Stanford's not even ranked.
My point, though, is that's a good way to start your streak. Beat Clemson in an upset. Beat Stanford, which would be an upset too now because it's on the road and Stanford beat them. Win those two, and then see what happens. You also don't know what's going to happen with these other teams that they're battling with around the country for those last spots. And this goes into kind of what we talked about with refereeing and some of these other things. You can't tell me that if they keep themselves in that little mosh pit of teams who are fighting for each other to be the last 4 in or the last whatever in, Carolina is going to get the benefit of the doubt over some of those other teams, just like Duke would, just like Kansas would, just like some of these big blue Kentucky would, whoever. So that's why I'm saying I'm not ready to say that they're out. I do think it's a long shot, and I do think they really can't lose any more games.
Is so bad this year. They have 2 teams in the top 25. They have Clemson and they have Duke. Those are the only 2 teams. Every team that they play from here on out, not considering Duke, which will be the last game of the season, doesn't have any kind of
Clemson would be a quality win for sure.
If they win tonight, Clemson would be a quality win.
That would be a quality.
What makes you think they're going to win? This is not the Carolina team that we've seen in past. We just saw Clemson go out there and do everything they can to beat Duke and at home. Clemson plays, they're probably 10 points better at home at Little John than they are anywhere else. Carolina, I think I'm guessing the spread would be -5, they're going to be +5. Carolina's going to be the underdog in this game.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Clemson's legit. Clemson's a really good basketball team. Clemson, this is not a fluke that they beat Duke. I mean, they're a really good basketball team, and they play well against top-rated teams, especially at home. But so Carolina going in there, and if they do get a victory, that'll be their first quality win of the year, really. Then they're at Syracuse, which should be a win. Home against NC State. They've already beat NC State once, but that's a rivalry game. You never know what would happen there. They're playing Virginia at home. Virginia's not good. Then they're at Florida State, not good. Against Miami, not good. At Virginia Tech solid, and then Duke. So
better chance tonight of happening would be North Carolina beating Clemson or Clemson beating them by more than 5.5, because that's the spread.
If I was going to take, I'm going to give you 2 scenarios. I'm going to give you 3 scenarios. All right. I'm going to give you 3. Here's the first scenario. If Clemson didn't just beat Duke, right, and storm the court and all that stuff, and let's say if Duke would have beat Clemson, I would have a lot easier time taking Carolina in the 5.5 tonight. I mean, excuse me, taking Clemson in the 5.5 tonight. But because they beat Duke, now I would lean to where maybe I would take the 5.5 points. Because again, the letdown factor it's real. And especially with teams, it happens with every team. I mean, every team we've rooted for, played on, we've had letdown games, right? But when you're a team like Clemson, who's turned themselves, I mean, that guy can coach his butt off, and they turned that program into a solid basketball program now. But they're not a Kentucky or a Duke in basketball. So when you do have that kind of win, I think the letdown factor gets you a little bit even more because you're not used to having those type of wins. So to me, it sets up for Carolina to at least have a shot at this ball game. Do I think they'll win? I don't know. I do think that Clemson, has a couple big boys inside who, one of the guys looks like my kids with his curly hair and is if he had
his old dad ball.
Yeah, if he had a beard, and he plays ball like we did growing up. But
he played Cooper Flag as well as anybody.
Yeah, and then they've got the transfer from Duke who played well. I don't think Clemson gave him the ball enough last game. Gaines, I believe. So, if I'm going to bet right now, I think I would probably take the 5.5. Matter of fact, what I probably would take would be the money line, just because the value for that bet to me would be worth it, because it would not surprise me if Carolina upset them. Now, with that being said, the guy at Clemson can coach his butt off. That's a scrappy, tough team. And so, the letdown factor may not even apply to them. They may come out, maybe they start slow, or who knows? I will say this. I don't get the feeling watching Carolina play, and I've seen pretty much every one of their games. I don't get the feeling that they have a guy on that team, and you would think it would be RJ Davis, and it hasn't been, that will take over in a close game and say, give me the damn ball. And Kadu is not that guy. He's not a scorer. And he's actually, if you look at what he's done there, I think most people would say he's been a little disappointing. Solid player. I'm not saying that, but I think they would say he's been disappointing. But they don't see, and that's what I think they're missing. Like Baycott, for them, not only was he going to get a double-double, he brought toughness. He would jerk a guy by his jersey on his own team and say, get your ass in here and do this or that. They don't really have that right now. And even the kid like Jackson, the freshman, he disappears. Like he's the kid that has shown he'll take over at times, and he hasn't. So I just think Carolina's missing something. And I'll tell you what, if they don't figure it out, if these next 5 or 6 games that we just went through that have a lot of winnable games, Virginia, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, Florida State, Miami, there's 5 right there. That's 5 games that they should win. If they don't, then the Tar Heels, not only are they looking at not making the NCAA tournament, but I think they're looking at a brand new coach. I really do, because Hubert's really not done much there with his own players. I think the only time that the time that they made it to the national championship, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was when he was basically playing with Roy's guys. And you still have to coach, and I get all that. I'm not taking the credit away, but what I am saying is the Carolina fans, and you just saw what they did getting rid of Mac Brown, Brandon Belichick, Now they're
not happy.
They're not happy.
They're impatient.
And if they don't win these next 5 games,
we're sitting here talking about being 5.5-point underdogs to Clemson.
Yeah,
you talked in so many circles. I don't know who you're choosing, but
no. I finally said
I want the truth.
I finally came out.
You can't handle the truth.
I told you. In my third scenario was when I was going with is
the third scenario.
I said if they would have lost to Duke, Clemson minus 5.5, I would have totally taken it. Because they won Duke, I have the factor or the theory of the letdown, and because of that, I will take either Carolina plus 5.5, or I'll take them on the money line just as an upset.
So you think Carolina covers, and you think they might win?
I think they play well.
I think they get blown out. I think they lose by 10 points.
What are we going to bet?
I mean, we're going to bet the line.
No, I know, but I'm saying, but what are we going to bet?
We can bet whatever. I mean, you name it.
I heard a game the other day that I'm pretty sure that I'm going to start a league with, but I can't discuss it on TV. But it's a way that people saw problems and that men saw problems.
It's a fighting league? We're not allowed to talk about it? Or
I
what
don't
is
want
this?
to bring it up on
we're not allowed
right
to
now.
say?
I want to save it so when I come out with it, everyone is so either appalled or interested that they go, holy crap.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things.
Okay.
So I'll tell you
I'm
off the air.
but
we're not going to do it. I can tell you that because number one, neither one of us can kick because of our back surgeries but it has something to do with kicking.
As an MMA game?
No, I'll tell you what, this would be illegal in the MMA.
Oh, wow.
So that might narrow it down for you.
Stomping on each other's nuts?
Well, it's not stomping.
Wow, it's something close there.
But yeah.
See, I already know where your mind
I heard these dudes talking about it. I had no idea what it was, and we Google it, and I'll be damned if they weren't right. And so I went, that would make like a great league.
Game.
Like I got to call Dana White and say, Dana, forget the slap fighting. Right. I got the next one. I got the next big thing. We just have to have good lawyers and good insurance policies. But no, so we got to put something on the game. We'll figure that out. But I'll take Carolina 5.5.
Okay, I got Clemson.
I would buy the hook, but after we after we had our handicapper on last week, Steve Merrill, I asked him about buying the hooks because you and I always disagree on it. By the way, I bought the hook on every game this weekend anyway. I just can't do it. If I end up losing, by that hook, it just pisses me off. But I did buy the hook, I think, on every game this weekend. And but if I bought the hook to 6, because I would buy the hook, I would take the 6.
I'd give you 6.
All right, I got Carolina plus 6. This could be the first time in history I'm pulling for Carolina, but I feel like I'll win either way.
Come on and tell me he was right.
Well,
so when they lose by 3, just like they've lost the last 15 games.
Well, I'll win either way. If they lose, I'm happy. Yeah. And if they win,
buying a win.
Then I'm buying a win, which is something that I like to do. I bet against the Panthers, I think, every weekend. I bet against Notre Dame every weekend. But yeah, so there's some good games this week, and then Duke's obviously going to have to rebound. Auburn's going to have. You've got a great SEC matchup this week. Again, a rematch with Tennessee and Kentucky. Actually, I don't know if that's a rematch or not. I can't remember if they played their first game yet. I think they did, but I might be wrong. But Kentucky coming off a big rebound win after a couple bad losses. So college basketball, I'm excited about it. So it's not football. Am I going to miss Thursday night football, whether the game stunk or not? Yep. Am I going to miss even the games on Tuesday and Wednesday and these little conferences? We just love watching football and watching these dudes compete. But I'm moving into basketball and then baseball. Hey, pitchers and catchers report this week. So again, if you're listening here in the South or wherever you're listening, every team is 0-0 right now. So everyone's got these great ideas of what their team may do this year. And me being a Mets fan, we should be really good. But unfortunately, we've got a team like the
Mets
Braves.
played really well last year.
They did. They ended strong, but we've got the Braves and we've got the Phillies and the Dodgers, who, I mean, good Lord. You're
gonna have to watch baseball.
You're gonna have to watch some baseball, but I'll teach you how the way to do it. Watching the Mets will be fun. Watching a lot of these teams will be fun. The Braves are healthy; they'll be fun. I hate Philadelphia, but man, they've got a bunch of guys that are fun to watch. The Dodgers have every player.
I love going to a baseball game.
I do too.
There's nothing worse. The only thing worse than watching a baseball game on TV is talking about it on the radio. Yeah,
it bores people. It does bore people. So when we do talk, it's going to be with a purpose.
Well, thankfully we have TV.
Yeah, and we're not going to be breaking down Mets games or Braves games, but we will be talking about some of the fun matchups and whatever.
You got to follow a little bit.
Yeah, and then once we get towards the playoffs, we dive into that as well. But thank you for joining us on our first show on WHKY, and we'll be on there every Monday and Friday nights from 8 to 10. You can always catch our podcast wherever you download your podcast or on YouTube. You can put in Suit Up Sports and it should come up for you on any of those.
I
And
can't wait till Friday where I'm right again.
I don't know about again or if you'll be right. But tomorrow I'll make sure that you'll wake up with a text message if I win.
If you win.
If I win. But yeah, thank you again for tuning in and checking us out. Again, you can email us at DJ@SuitUpSports or Frank@SuitUpSports. Thanks to Dylan, Big D, our producer over here, who's doing a great job. And we will see you Friday.